the Rangers showed they still have more surprises up their sleeves by signing, of course, Nathan Eovaldi. We'll talk about why this happened, how it benefits the Rangers, and where it puts their rotation. And spoiler alert, it's pretty darn good. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to the Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan since 2010, the founder and host for all 4 seasons of this Locked On Rangers podcast. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers and subscribe on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment any single thing below. Now, the Rangers have signed Nathan Eovaldi to a 2-year contract, and according to Jeff Passan, it starts at $34 million total over those 2 years. Bonuses up to $3 million a year if he reaches 160 innings pitched, which he did in 2021. He's got a player option if he throws 300 innings from 23 to 24, so the next 2 years. A $20 million option in 2025 with another $3 million in bonuses. So the maximum that deal can be is 3 years, $63 million. And that's a pretty darn good deal. And a pretty darn surprising deal, because the Rangers set out this offseason to, number one, retain Martin Perez, bring him back, and then add 2 more starting pitchers. I thought, maybe it's 3. Well, they traded for 1 after re-signing to Martin Perez to the qualifying offer. Then they went and signed Jacob deGrom. Thought, okay, fantastic. That's the best you could freaking do. Awesome. Then they signed Andrew Heaney, and I thought, okay, cool. That was after they had already traded for Jake Odorizzi. And I thought, all right, that's a pretty good rotation. That's solid. Middle of the pack, maybe above average in the AL West. It's not beating the Astros. It's probably not beating the Mariners. It's probably not even, maybe it's beating the Angels, depending on how the back end goes after Shohei Ohtani. But I thought, that's solid enough. You go get yourself another bat, and then boom, you're in business, and you are a contending team. At this point, before the signing, I thought, all right, this is probably an 81 to 85 win team, competing pretty comfortably for one of those back to wild cards. With this signing, I think it puts them pretty much into the 83 to 88 win category, pretty comfortably competing for that second wild card, maybe pushing for the first wild card. This gives them one of the better rotations in baseball. According to Fangraphs, they have the Rangers ranked as the number 2 rotation in all of baseball next year, behind just the New York Yankees. According to their WAR calculations for next year, the Yankees, they have them projected for a 3.55 ERA and 16.7 WAR among their starters. And the Rangers, they have a 3.71 ERA, 15.6 WAR among their starters, led by, of course, Jacob deGrom, John Gray, Martin Perez, Nathan Eovaldi now, and Andrew Heaney as well. Eovaldi is a guy who I didn't think a whole lot about in terms of what the Rangers were going to do after Jacob deGrom. I thought initially, okay, if he's the best that you get, then that's not great. I would have rather had one of those top 3. And if you get him one of those top 3, and they did with Jacob deGrom, I thought, all right, they're pretty much out of the sweepstakes for Nathan Eovaldi, because there's a lot of other teams that still need some really solid to above average starters, and Eovaldi is a pretty darn good one, coming off a less than stellar season with the Boston Red Sox right after his career year in 2021, his first and only All-Star appearance. That year in 2021, his age 31 season, he had a 3.75 ERA, 32 starts, most of his career, 182.1 innings, 195 strikeouts, was an All-Star, got MVP votes, finished 15th in MVP voting, and 4th in Cy Young voting, the only year that he has had Cy Young votes, and he was absolutely outstanding. He has been a guy who is a big fastball guy, has a changeup that is actually a splitter, not just a regular changeup. It is very effective, uses it a lot more often. He's also got a curveball, a slider, and a cutter that he throws in there. Varies his pitches pretty regularly. Fastball is under 40%, and still has a pretty big fastball, but it has dropped off off a little bit in terms of the velocity as opposed to where it was in 2021, which I think was why he was a little bit less effective. But the things that he does well is he pitches to get a lot of strikeouts, and he does not give up a lot of walks. He's been very, very good in his career at limiting walks. Last year, in the top 5% of all of baseball in terms of limiting his walk rate, and the year before in the top 4% of baseball as well. Very, very good at that, and has been for many, many years. He's been a fairly inconsistent pitcher. He has not been incredibly durable. That 182 innings that he pitched in 2021 was only the second time in his career where he's pitched 180 or more. The first time was in Miami in 2014 as a 24-year-old, so it's been a hot minute since then. He finished one out shy of 200 innings, and that was his career high. He's only pitched 150 innings one more time outside of those 2 seasons, and that was back with the Yankees, his first year with New York in 2015. So it's been a hot minute since he's been super duper durable. But last year, 109 innings, 3.87 ERA, and if that's about what he's giving the Rangers, I think they would feel pretty comfortable with that, because he is not brought in to be the anchor of this rotation. He's not even probably brought in to be a top 2 pitcher in the rotation, though he definitely has that upside. We saw that with Boston in 2021. I don't think he's going to reach those heights, but I do think he's going to be a really, really solid middle of the rotation pitcher who can go out there and every once in a while give you an absolutely dazzling start. And I think that one of the biggest things he brings is some safety, which might sound counterintuitive for a guy who has struggled with injuries in his career, but I really do think it makes a lot of sense. We're going to get into that and a little bit more coming up. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season and basketball. We've got it all at BetOnline.net. If you want to bet on Luka Doncic putting up another 60-point triple-double in the next game that he goes out there and does, well, that'd probably be a pretty hefty bet, but I'm sure you could find it. If you want to bet on the Mavs to make the playoffs, or the Stars to make the playoffs, or the Cowboys to do things in the playoffs, then you can absolutely do that at BetOnline. We are always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more, because BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Now, you may be saying, Bryce, that's counterintuitive. Why would they bring in a guy who is always hurt to be a steadying presence, or a guy who, brings insurance? Well, the Rangers kind of have a rotation at this point full of guys who have been hurt in their career, for the most part. Martin Perez is the one exception. He is projected to throw 184 innings according to Fangraphs next year, which I think is a little on the low side, honestly. Their projections just really don't like guys like Martin Perez. They are more geared to love guys like Jake Odorizzi and Eovaldi, guys who rely more on the strikeouts and less on the hard contact. They like that a whole lot more, very, very favorably in their projections, whereas Baseball Reference, it's kind of inverted the other way. But I do think Martin Perez is it's a pretty safe bet for him to lead this team in innings next year. They have him at a 1.8 projected WAR. According to Fangraphs, I don't think that he's going to do that. I think he's going to be a little bit better than that. But I do still think that he fits in as the Rangers' number 2 in the rotation, and he is the linchpin of it because he is the healthiest one of this bunch. Andrew Heaney, John Gray, deGrom, and Eovaldi, all of these guys suffered injuries last year. Even the number 6 guy in this rotation at this point, well, actually, I think he kind of bumped to number 7 in Dane Dunning. Jake Odorizzi, this kind of slots him back into the bullpen and kind of moves him into a role that I thought the Rangers' one reliever they needed would be kind of a multi-inning right-handed guy who could give you some length if you needed it, but could also come in maybe higher leverage situations, and maybe that's what this moves him into. Maybe this gives the Rangers that kind of depth arm, or maybe they're going to go with just a 6-man rotation. Maybe that's entirely possible. They mentioned it. They mentioned it a little bit earlier because early in the season, a couple weeks ago, right after they signed Heaney, when there were questions about, are you going to add another starter, they kind of poo-pooed it and said, oh, no, we're fine. We're fine with our rotation as we've got it now. We're not going to go with a 6-man rotation because we got a lot of off days early on in the schedule. And I thought, okay, well, that's fine. That's all they're going to do with that. But no. They are going to move Jake Odorizzi into the bullpen most probably and have have Nathan Eovaldi dominate. Dominate in the starting rotation. And I think that is just absolutely fantastic because I don't know how safe a bet any of these guys are to pitch 180 innings outside of Martin Perez. And so if they're having trips on the IL, then you need some depth. You need some quality, proven depth if you're going to be a winner this year, which the Rangers have stated over and over and over again that they want to be. And as good as it is to have Dane Dunning as your number 6 guy to step in an emergency, if somebody, Lord forbid, goes on the IL for a 2 or 1.5 month stint, to have him come in and be that guy. But if you have that, if you have him as your number 7 starter, if Jake Odorizzi is a guy who's coming in more often to step in and ease that burden if somebody needs to just scratch a start, I think that is a huge improvement. It also gives Dane Dunning a lot more time to rest and recover from his hip surgery that he underwent at the very end of the season. He's projected to be, they said at the end of the year that the Rangers said that Dane Dunning is going to be healthy for opening day. That was the goal. But I haven't heard a whole lot of updates on that. I hope he's doing well. Hope that his rehab is going well. But this kind of affords him the ability to just kind of relax, not try and be over aggressive with it, and not try and push too hard on that rehab, and just come back when he is fully ready. And I absolutely love that. Because the Rangers have not had depth. This really, the biggest thing that this shows is that the Rangers are learning from their mistakes. Last year, I went into the season, I thought, okay, this is a much improved team from the 2020 roster and even the 2021 roster. But they need some more pitching. And they just did not have enough starting pitching. There was a bunch of ifs and maybes and buts and, almost if you squint and look this way, then it could be like this, and just no. It just straight up did not work out for them, and everything kind of went wrong. And this whole offseason, Chris Young has been saying, well, you can never have enough pitching. You can never have enough pitching. You can never have enough pitching. Well, he freaking meant it, because he keeps getting more and more and more pitching. So by doing that, they allow themselves a much bigger buffer between them and disaster, depending on the number of injuries, however many they be, to starting pitching, whether it's 1, whether it's 0, whether it's 3. They have got enough to weather the storm and not be totally underwater if something catastrophic were to happen, if one of their top 5 goes down for the year. Everything's not lost. Granted, that all goes out the window if that one who goes down for the year is Jake Odorizzi. Then I think hopes of playoffs are pretty much kaput. But still, even if Jake Odorizzi goes out for the year with an injury in spring training, this team will not be a below 500 team. This will still be a pretty darn good team. I don't think this means they're done by any means, but I do think that it means that they are extra serious about, beefing up their roster and allowing themselves some more flexibility. I still do think they need a bat. There are still plenty of options out there in free agency, and I do still think the Rangers are being aggressive. I am mildly annoyed at them by just one thing, personally, and it's just me being a little bit petty. I wish they would have done this like a week ago. just like a week ago, when I wasn't starting to get deathly ill, my voice leaving me, and not being at my apartment so I could record a podcast on this, and had to wait until I got off work and got home at 1:30 a.m. to be recording this nonsense. But it's still a great move, and there's still plenty of bats out there. And I'm just really shocked by this, because it is not what I expected at all. Honestly, looking at the rest of the starting pitching market, I really do think Nathan Eovaldi was the best pitcher that's left. And it's kind of hilarious that of all these teams that still need starting pitching, the Rangers are the ones who don't really need him, that came in and got themselves a pretty good deal for a pretty good pitcher. And if things work out with him or with Andrew Heaney or with John Gray or with any of these other guys that are not the, number one BA guy who they signed in Jacob deGrom, it's just if a couple things go right with any of these kind of fringe guys that they were betting on, then this Rangers rotation could be absolutely dominant next year. Coming up, we're going to look at where he fits in the rotation among these guys and what it means for the Rangers moving forward. But first, let's hear from our sponsors. You're hanging out with some friends, putting back a few drinks, and a few becomes a few too many. And as the evening comes to an end, people start to head out. You think of calling for a ride, but nah, you live nearby. You can make it home okay, it's no big deal. What are the odds you get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows the risk of driving drunk, and the results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So, if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead and get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. Now, where does he slot into the rotation? Now, Nathan Eovaldi, I think at his peak, is something like a number 2 in this rotation. I think his peak is maybe a little bit better than Martin Perez. I think maybe it's about what John Gray's is. Maybe it's what we're hoping from Andrew Heaney next year collectively. But to be honest, I don't think that he is going to hit that peak. He is towards the downslope, I think, of his career at this point. The Alvin, Texas native, by the way, fun fact, he's 32, he turns 33 in February. The only other Alvin High School graduate who has pitched in the major leagues is a former Texas Ranger and is Nolan Ryan. That is not to say that he's Nolan Ryan. He's not, because he doesn't walk a whole lot of guys. He's also about, 4,000 career strikeouts short of Nolan. That's fine. Still had a pretty darn good career. But I think where he slots into this rotation is probably as the number 4 at this point. I've talked a lot about how, these guys, if this and if that, they can be a little bit better than Martin Perez. But, none of the other guys outside of Jacob deGrom in this rotation have had a season that has been nearly as good as what Martin Perez did last year. Like, they just haven't. None of them have. And he is coming off of it. Literally, last year looked like an entirely new pitcher. So, until proven otherwise, I am operating with the mindset that Martin Perez is the Rangers' number 2 starter, game 2 starter in a playoff series in the season. I'm assuming that's where he slots in. And behind him, that's where it starts to get a little confusing, whether it's obviously Jacob deGrom is number 1, then Martin Perez, but I think it's kind of interesting. I don't know exactly where to flip-flop John Gray and Eovaldi. I think both those guys fit in ahead of Andrew Heaney, but where they rank, I'm not entirely sure. If you're looking at the projections from Fangraphs, they're both projected to be pretty similar pitchers. Eovaldi is projected for 2.4 WAR next year and a 3.90 ERA, whereas John Gray projected for a 3.92 ERA and a 2.5 WAR. But the difference comes in the amount of innings eaten. Gray's projected for 174 innings and Eovaldi projected for 158 next year. I think that is what the difference is in those two. Eovaldi is going to allow a little bit fewer base runners. He's going to allow a little bit more home runs. I think he's going to strike out fewer than John Gray, but Gray, I think, is proven to be a little bit more durable than Eovaldi. He is a little bit younger than him as well, so I'm trusting Gray as the number 3, putting Eovaldi as the number 4, and Andrew Heaney as the number 5 starter on this team. If you would have told me heading into the offseason that Andrew Heaney was going to be the Rangers' number 4 starter, and Nathan Eovaldi was going to be Nathan Eovaldi was going to be the Rangers' number 4 starter, and Andrew Heaney was going to be the Rangers' number 5 starter, I would have slapped you in the mouth and called you a darn liar, because that would seem absolutely impossible. But that's what the Rangers have done. This is the ideal pitching staff upgrade in their rotation. The only way it could have been a little bit better is if they wanted to go and spend crazy, stupid money and get Carlos Rodon, I don't know that was ever realistically in the question, but I didn't think they were completely out of it. I think the Yankees just outbid what the Rangers were willing to do. That's fine. And tying up that much money in deGrom and Rodon just felt a little bit too risky, but spending a decent chunk of change, but not a crap ton and not a crap ton of years on a guy who does have a little bit of red flag injury concerns in Eovaldi. They did the same thing with Heaney. Heaney has a few more opt-outs. They're a little bit more committed to Eovaldi than Heaney. But it feels good. It feels like a really, really good, smart move. It is not what I would expected. It's not what the league expected, I think. And I'm just really impressed by Chris Young and what he has done to reform this starting pitching staff, and just the doubling and tripling and quadrupling down of, like, pitchers always have risk. They always have risk of injuries no matter who they are, even if they're 25 years old, have never had a single injury in their entire lives, and have just been the perfect picture of health. They could go out there and just completely rupture their entire arm like any day. It's just, pitchers are freaks. You're not supposed to throw a baseball 100 times 90 to or 80 to 100 miles an hour once every 5 days. It does bad things to your shoulder and arm and elbow and entire body. It's just not a natural thing that humans were created to do. It's just not. So no matter who you have, there is a lot of inherent risk in these pitchers. That's why I love the signing of Jake Odorizzi, because it's like, screw it, it's not my money. Go spend a bunch of money on this guy. If he gets hurt, well, then they've got some other guys who are pretty darn good, could be really darn good. And it's just a matter of hoping they can all stay healthy. Now, granted, they probably all won't. So that's why it's so great to have so dang many of these guys to give yourself some insurance if things start to go wrong, that you're not just immediately colossally collapsed. Because that was the Rangers' problem heading into this year. The offense was fine. It was fine. It was pretty good to fine. And there are a lot of people crapping on the offense next year. And I think adding a even moderately healthy Mitch Garver is a massive, colossal upgrade that people keep forgetting about. He is still on the Rangers. Adding Josh Young in there, I think, is a pretty darn big upgrade from what the Rangers got offensively at third base this year. I think that in center field and left field, they don't have a whole lot of offense coming from those positions with who they've got currently slated to be there right now. But, the infield is going to be one of the better offensive infields in baseball. It's going to be way up there. Adolis Garcia is a 3.5 win player the last 2 years. He is a really darn good player fitting in the middle of that lineup. And I think that this team is much closer to competing than a lot of people give it credit for. The bullpen was better than expected last year, better than the results indicated. And last year there were so many question marks that were not, major league question marks. They were, these guys have been okay in AAA, and like, we think they're just about ready to turn the corner. But it was a whole lot of them, and basically his numbers, well, everyone outside of Dane Dunning and John Gray and Martin Perez, it was like, well, they could be pretty good, or they probably could not, and they almost all leaned towards probably could not. And so things just kind of went to crap for the Rangers, starting pitching-wise. And then when they had injuries from those guys who were probably not even expected to be on the in the rotation nearly as quickly as they were, things just really, really went downhill incredibly quickly. So the Rangers have learned from that mistake. They have prepared themselves for that eventuality in the future, and I am really, really proud of them from learning from that mistake so quickly. So this is a great move for the Rangers. I think it gives them one of the best rotations in baseball. Now, they do have the Rangers number 2 ahead of the Mets in terms of Fangraphs and their projected WAR for the Rangers starting pitching rotation. I think that's hilarious. I also don't think that's necessarily super accurate, because they don't have Kodai Senga in there, and I do think he is going to be a starting pitcher. But still, it's kind of a fun little thing to laugh and smirk at just for a hot second, not to poke any bears with the Mets fans who are already still on edge about everything the Rangers do, because everything the Rangers do is apparently about the Mets. It's not. it's not. It's fine. But I do have a soft spot in my heart for poor Red Sox fans who already lost Xander Bogaerts and have now lost another member of that 2018 World Series team in Nathan Eovaldi. He was in the bullpen that year and did end up closing out one of those games in the 2018 World Series for the Boston Red Sox, in which they won, had a sub 1.5 ERA in that series, and has, I think, around a 3.10 career postseason ERA, which is pretty darn impressive. A 3.14 ERA in 43 postseason innings. That is just two different postseasons, in 2018 with Boston and in 2021 when Boston made it to the ALCS. So very, very exciting stuff for the Rangers. Very nice little surprise in between Christmas and New Year's, when I didn't think they were going to do a single darn thing, or that anybody was really going to do much of anything. But who knows? With Carlos Correa still in doubt and not officially going to the Mets either now, then who knows? Maybe the Rangers are going to do something stupid and tomorrow and just throw a bunch of money at Carlos Correa and just surprise us all yet again. But that, until that happens, that is going to do it for this edition of Locked On Rangers. Thank y'all so much for listening and subscribing, even though my voice is dying. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.